There's a good reason why it's often said no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Or as Mike Tyson put it more bluntly, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. In other words, after a plan is drafted, there will be unexpected elements that will call for improvisation. I'm Mike Harris and I help businesses to successfully grow their profit and turnover. In the last year alone, I have helped over 20 companies at least double in size. And I work with a mixture of firms for small, medium and large businesses, including startups and multinationals. Today I'm going to give you free advice on one of the most important things to successfully grow your business. That's right, free of charge. Today we're going to look at what, in my experience, is the main reason why businesses fail, sometimes in year one. Back at the start of season 3, I explained that there are 4 things you must focus on to successfully grow your business. Get those 4 things right and you're over halfway to having a successful business. But get the last one wrong, well, that's what we're going to talk about here today. So today we're going to talk about the subject of your key challenges. These are the obstacles that you need to overcome to make your strategy a success. In previous episodes, we've spoken about your ambition, which is what is going to make your strategy a success. We've also talked about your identity and your competitive advantage. And these are why you're going to be a success and how you're going to make it a success. But the key challenges is looking at why you're not going to be successful, why it might not succeed, where it might go wrong. So what we're looking at here is anticipating what are those obstacles that will kill your strategy. Now, this is not to be defeatist. The reason for doing it is if you can identify these early on, you can put countermeasures in place. You can develop action plans to address the issues, put in place mitigation plans. This is a critical aspect of scaling your business. Interestingly, when I talk to customers and they have produced a business strategy and are looking to grow, in the past they have told me they have not looked at the key challenges, and they can see why this is one of the reasons they have failed. So why is it important? Well, most business strategies focus on their objectives. They want to be the biggest or the best or the most profitable or the most loved business in their sector. They may set out the plan on what they want to achieve with new products, new clients, new markets, additional staff. But these aren't really strategies at all. These are just plans or just lists, or worse of all, just wish lists. There's a good reason why it's often said no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Or as Mike Tyson put it more bluntly, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. In other words, after a plan is drafted, there will be unexpected elements that will call for improvisation. All of which could be your metaphorical punch in the mouth. But that's the problem with plans. They tend to be short-term, not thinking much beyond the here and now. But luckily, we're not the Managers of Plans podcast. We're the Leaders in Strategy podcast, which means we have to be strategic. We have to look at the long term, anticipate those unexpected elements, which I know is a bit of a contradiction. So starting with the end in mind, you need to identify the key trip hazards that will destabilize your business. So how do you go about identifying those key challenges, I hear you ask? Well, in my workshops, this is the approach I take. I start by asking the question, what will stop you from growing your business? And then with my marker pen in hand, I brainstorm with my customers a long list of the items that they think are going to be those obstacles. We look at what are the unexpected items. This is not easy by their very nature. They can be hard to predict. However, you don't need a crystal ball or a time machine. By using everybody's experience, you will inevitably identify most of those critical obstacles. And when I do this, I split them between internal, which are usually under your control, and external, which are not necessarily under your control. The obstacles are normally those that will impact on the life of the business, say over the next 3 years. But some may only be impacting on the year ahead of you, or some may not appear until year 2 or year 3. I then focus on the ones that will impact on the current year. That's not to ignore the others, but there's only so much you can focus on, and there has to be a priority. But let's be honest, if we don't resolve those challenges that are facing us here and now, there won't be future years to address the other challenges. From that long list, then, I look at condensing it down to 4 critical challenges, which, if not addressed, will stop you from scaling your business. Then, having got those 4 key challenges, we analyse why we believe they are the most critical. We check that they cover the whole of your business strategy, looking at your ambition, identity, and competitive advantage. And we test the critical challenges to ensure that they reasonably cover all of the key components of the business. So, for instance, they cover your work winning side, the operational side of the business, the financial parts of the business, your HR and people aspect, and maybe most of all, that the key challenges are looking at where the customer is going to be and the challenges associated with your customers. So, as this is so important, I thought I'd provide a real life example. Now, to be honest, this is an amalgamation of a few companies' challenges, which I've done in order not to breach confidentiality and to protect the innocent, but they are typical examples. So now let's look at some real key challenges that businesses face. So what I've got is a long list of obstacles. I've got 15 in total, but I'm not going to go through all of them. We haven't got time. So I'm just going to pick out some highlights, which are ones that come up on a regular basis. First, there's not enough staff. In other words, the business doesn't have the capacity in order to scale the business successfully. The second is doing the day job as well as scaling the business. In other words, everybody who's going to be focusing at that business growth has already got the job they do day to day. Now, can they find the space in their diary to really focus on that growth? The third one is about money. So the cash, do you have the cash to invest? Do you have the cash in bank? Scaling a business is not cheap. It needs investment. So have you got the money to do that? The next key obstacle is securing the work. If you're building the business, you're growing it, you need new customers, you need new orders. So that's a key obstacle, can sometimes be securing that additional work. The next one is maintaining delivery on the orders that you've currently got. It's easy to go chasing after this bright new shiny customer or this bright new shiny work and forget you've still got to deliver the work that you've already got. If you're trying to grow, say, from, I don't know, £1 million to £2 million, if you don't get that initial £1 million right and deliver it correctly, those customers are not going to come back, and it's going to become even more difficult to grow the business. Quite often when a business grows, it loses its culture. And the reason for that is there's lots of new people coming in. Those people are not necessarily aware of what the culture is. They don't do things the same way. And there's a risk that the culture that's made the business successful gets diluted. Obtaining employee buy-in is really important. So as an owner or as a director of business, it's easy to get drawn into the strategy to grow and to focus on that. But you need everybody in the business to buy into it. And that can be an obstacle. And lastly is the mindset. Getting a growth mindset. It's not easy, and people need to be robust, and they need to be challenging, and they need to be agile. So getting that mindset into the business is key. So there you go. There's a few obstacles that are quite common when scaling your business. So taking those obstacles and then breaking them down into 4 key challenges that will need to be overcome to make the growth plan a success. And again, these are ones that come up on a regular basis. So the first critical challenge that businesses find is not having the time. Being able to free up the time to focus on the business growth, finding the time to get out there and talk to new clients, maybe working in new sectors. They're too focused on doing their day-to-day job, and they're constrained by doing that day job. Now, the second critical challenge I normally describe as having the right people in the right place at the right time. So this is looking at making sure you've got the capacity in the business to do the growth, but also that you've got the capability. Quite often, when you're growing a business, you're working in new sectors, maybe releasing a new product, and you need to grow the capability in order to do that. Also, it's important not to get that additional resource too early in case you can't afford it, or too late that the business is being stretched and is not able to perform. And not just about employees as well, it's also about the supply chain. Have you got the right supply chain in place? Are they able to scale up at the same time as you're scaling up? And key to making the growth a success for everybody is, how do you develop your employees? How do you upskill them and help them grow their careers as the business grows? So the third challenge is sustainable growth. It's not easy to scale and grow your business, but the first year it's easier than the second year. And the reason for that is you've got the passion, you've got the enthusiasm, you've got the energy. But in year two, you've not only got that additional work, that additional orders that you've achieved in year one, what you're now having to do is grow it again. And you've got to keep that momentum going, and you've got to keep that enthusiasm going, which can be very tough. So I would say sustainable growth, and not just one-off 1 year growth, is really important. And key to that is the cash flow, which I mentioned earlier. Make sure the money there for the growth so you can fund the growth. It's also making sure that it's not just growth in turnover, it's growth in profit as well. Most businesses, they home in on the turnover and their profit percentages drop as a result. And then the last critical challenge that most face when scaling their business is keeping the shape of the business. Make sure that the business isn't pulled out of shape, that the new product or the new sectors or the new clients doesn't actually dominate the business, doesn't take up all of their time and energy so that they can't focus on the other things that matter. It's making sure that the growth doesn't impact on the quality, whether that's of service or of product, that you don't end up over trading, trying to do too much work with not enough resource. And then as business leaders, it's about your own span of control. There's only so much that we can get our arms around and effectively manage. And as the business grows, that's going to get harder. And if you're not aware of this and thinking about what you can delegate, how you bring in other people to take over some of the things that you previously had responsibility for, you are going to find it very hard to manage the business, and you're going to miss things, and things are going to fall between two stools. So as I say, keeping the shape of the business is the fourth critical challenge that a lot of businesses face. So there you have it. Today's topic, the key challenges when scaling a business. So in summary, most growth strategies fail because they only focus on the positives. They cross their fingers, close their eyes, and hope for the best. But one of the most important aspects of any growth strategy is identifying the challenges that need to be overcome to make that strategy a success, anticipating what will be the obstacles that could stop the growth. Your challenges must be evenly spread across the key business components such as work winning, operations, finance, HR, etc. You must honestly acknowledge the challenges being faced and provide an approach to overcoming them, which funny enough is the topic for one of our future podcasts. I should mention this process is not a one-off exercise. It needs to be carried out at the start of each year, looking at the challenges applicable to the business year ahead. In my role at Strategies Consulting, I've worked with many businesses developing and implementing growth strategies, and the majority have been very successful. Why? Because they correctly identify those key challenges and put in place effective solutions to managing them. As you know, I like to give homework, and today's homework, you've guessed it, hold a workshop with your colleagues and identify the key obstacles to your growth plan. Draw up a long list that covers the whole life of your strategy. From there, agree 4 key challenges that will need to be managed over the next 12 months. Let me know how you get on. As always, you can comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can message me on LinkedIn or email me, etc. I just thought I'd give you some feedback. We haven't done this for a while, but we've got some really excellent feedback on the new format, especially the graphics. You seem to be really enjoying the guests that we're having and the broad range of subjects that we're covering. We've even now hit over 1,300 subscribers on YouTube, which is fantastic, with many more listening on the audio podcast. When 18 months ago I launched the Leaders in Strategy podcast, I couldn't have imagined that we'd be helping so many people become better leaders and grow their business through strategy. And now we have on average 5,000 people tuning in every week. So thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments. So here's a quick reminder of where you can find us. You can watch us on the Leaders in Strategy YouTube channel, listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Podbean, Podchaser. We upload every week onto our LinkedIn channel and onto our website. And you can also read this episode on our Leaders and Strategy blog, which also is uploaded onto our website. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and you come back and join us next time when we'll be looking at another subject which will deliver you significant and sustainable growth. I'll see you then.